The sky was still dark when Daniel Miller eased his silver Mercedes into the driveway, headlights cutting briefly across the quiet New Jersey street before fading into silence. He moved carefully, almost rehearsed, the way a man walks after doing something he knows he shouldn't. Inside the car, the lingering scent of hotel perfume clung to his jacket. He didn't bother wiping it off. He thought no one would notice. He thought everyone in the house was asleep. He thought he was safe. Inside, 14-year-old Jake sat alone at the dining table, the glow of the family iPad lighting half his face. His thumb trembled as he stared at the GPS history synced automatically from his father's iPhone. He had watched the blue dot sit at the same luxury hotel near Central Park for hours. He had watched it move only once at dawn, straight toward home. He had waited, not to confirm anything. Deep down, he already knew. He just needed to see Daniel walk through that door, to believe the kind of truth a child should never have to learn. In the dim hallway, Laura lay awake, her heart tightening at the faint sound of the garage door closing. She had been sensing something changing in Daniel for months. Cold stares, late nights, empty excuses, but tonight felt different. She felt it in her bones, a weight pressing on her chest, warning her that whatever was coming through that door would break something fragile in her home. Daniel stepped inside, soft-footed, ready to deliver the same tired excuse about emergency maintenance at the office. But the moment he saw Jake sitting upright at the table, eyes red, iPad still glowing, Daniel froze. His rehearsed smile faded. His keys slipped from his fingers and clattered against the tile. "Hey, buddy," he whispered, trying to sound normal. "You're up early." Jake didn't answer. He simply turned the iPad around. The map filled the screen, every stop, every minute, every lie circled in red. Daniel's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, maybe to deny, maybe to blame, but Jake stood first, walked past him, and headed to his room without a single word. Laura stepped into the hallway just in time to see it, and Daniel hadn't yet realized Jake had already pressed post. Azzy. What the world would wake up to in 1 hour was about to destroy everything Daniel thought he controlled. Laura Miller had always been the kind of woman people trusted. Instantly, the steady school nurse who kept Band-Aids in every pocket, the mom who remembered every bake sale, the neighbor who brought soup when someone was sick. At 38, she was gentle but tired, carrying the kind of quiet exhaustion that only comes from years of putting everyone else first. Her brown hair was pulled into a loose bun most days, not because she didn't care about herself, but because life rarely gave her the luxury of slowing down. She believed in routines: morning coffee at 6:30, packing Jake's lunch at 6:45, checking emails on her old MacBook at 7. She believed in kindness, in hard work, in doing what was right even when it hurt. But more than anything, she believed in her family: Daniel, the man she married at 24, and Jake, the boy who still hugged her every morning even if he rolled his eyes afterward. Yet in the months leading up to that dawn, Laura had sensed something unraveling, something subtle at first, hidden in the small cracks. Daniel had started working late. He guarded his phone. He showered the moment he came home, as if rinsing off parts of the day she wasn't allowed to know about. When she asked if everything was all right, he always replied with the same cold, dismissive smile. "Just stress, Laura. You worry too much." Maybe she did. Maybe she always had. But she worried because she cared, because she had spent years holding this family together while Daniel pursued promotions, overtime, and the version of success he believed he deserved. She had stood by him through job changes, financial scares, and the period where he almost lost his father. She had been loyal, patient, soft, too soft, sometimes. But none of her instincts, none of her fears, prepared her for the look on Jake's face when he shuffled into the kitchen after posting the GPS screenshot. His eyes were swollen from crying, his hands shaking as he reached for a glass of water. 14 was too young for this kind of heartbreak. 14 was supposed to be about homework, awkward crushes, baseball practice, not learning. Your father spent the night in a Manhattan hotel with someone else. "Jake?" she asked softly, stepping toward him. "Honey, what happened?" He didn't answer. He simply placed the iPad on the counter and walked past her, his shoulders hunched, as if carrying a weight he didn't know how to lift. Laura picked up the device. The image on the screen hit her like a blow to the chest. The hotel address, the blue line on the map, the timestamp, everything. Her breath caught. For a moment, she couldn't even blink. It felt as if the world had tilted sideways, swallowing all the air around her. She wanted to scream. She wanted to collapse. She wanted to pretend it wasn't real, but all she could do was stand there, frozen, with the truth burning into her hands. Daniel entered the kitchen seconds later, trying to pretend nothing was wrong. But Laura didn't meet his eyes. She didn't have the strength. She just stared at the iPad, her voice trembling when she finally whispered, "How long?" Daniel's face emptied. He stuttered. He tried to spin a lie, then another, each less convincing than the last. But Laura no longer heard him. Her world had cracked, clean and sharp, like glass under pressure. And standing in that kitchen, with the early sun creeping across the floor, she realized something terrifying. This was only the beginning. Because within hours, the whole world would see what Jake had posted, and nothing in their quiet suburban life would ever be the same. The Miller home had always been an ordinary, comforting place. 2 stories, cream siding, small front porch with a rocking chair Laura bought from a yard sale years ago. It sat in a quiet New Jersey cul-de-sac, shaded by maple trees, the kind of street where neighbors waved while taking out the trash and kids rode bikes in circles until dusk. To outsiders, the Millers looked like the picture of stability: a hard-working father, a dedicated mother, a polite teenage son, a family that blended into suburban life so smoothly that no one ever looked closely enough to see what was breaking beneath the surface. But on the morning after Daniel's secret night in Manhattan, that calm little home felt like a pressure cooker. Every wall seemed to hold its breath. Every hallway echoed with unspoken tension. Sunlight trickled through the living room blinds, landing on the framed family photos that suddenly felt like lies. Daniel holding baby Jake in the hospital, the 3 of them smiling at a beach vacation in Delaware, Laura laughing while Daniel hugged her from behind. She used to believe those memories were the foundation of their life together. Now they felt like props, decorations of a story that had stopped being true long ago. Their kitchen, the heart of the house, carried the strongest shift. It had always been warm and cluttered, mismatched mugs, the smell of coffee, school papers pinned on the fridge, but that morning it felt cold. Too quiet, too clean, as if the truth had swept through and stripped the room of its softness. The iPad still sat on the counter, face down now, but the image of the GPS map burned into Laura's mind. She couldn't unsee it. Outside, their street was already waking up. A neighbor walked his golden retriever past the driveway, waving at Daniel like it was any other day. A delivery truck rumbled by, dropping an Amazon package at the house across the road. Kids waited for the school bus at the corner. Everything looked normal, painfully normal, while Laura's world hung by a thread. Meanwhile, across the river in Manhattan, Chloe was starting her morning in a very different setting. Her small Brooklyn apartment overlooked a busy street where taxis honked, delivery bikes weaved between cars, and life moved at a pace that ignored personal disasters. She sipped her iced coffee, scrolling through the growing number of notifications on her phone. Someone had already screenshotted Jake's viral post and sent it to a coworker. The rumor mill inside Daniel's office, tower tall, reflective, corporate, had already begun to spin. The contrast between Laura's quiet cul-de-sac and the Manhattan skyline made everything feel sharper. Daniel moved between these 2 worlds daily, suburban comfort and city temptation. And Laura had never realized how far he had drifted into the second one. Back at the Miller home, Jake sat in his room, staring out his window at the same street he had grown up on. Baseball posters lined his walls, a half-finished Lego set sat on the floor, and his backpack lay unzipped at the foot of his bed. It was a child's room, meant for innocence. But Jake didn't feel like a child anymore. Not after last night. Not after seeing what the GPS revealed. Not after hearing his father's shaky voice try to lie again. The setting of their life, this quiet neighborhood, this comfortable house, had once been a shield. But today, it became the stage for the unraveling of a marriage, the breaking of a father's image, and the awakening of a son who learned the truth too early. And though Laura didn't know it yet, this peaceful cul-de-sac would soon become the center of a storm that would pull in coworkers, neighbors, lawyers, and even the school itself. Because secrets like Daniel's don't stay hidden, not in a town where everyone thinks they know everyone. Daniel Miller had once been the kind of man people described as reliable. A steady presence, a dedicated employee, a father who never missed a school game, at least in the early years. But time had reshaped him. Success had sharpened him in the worst ways. The long train rides into Manhattan, the pressure of corporate expectations, the thrill of being noticed by younger coworkers. Slowly, Daniel drifted into a version of himself that Laura barely recognized. And the man who returned home at dawn was no longer the husband she once loved. Daniel wasn't just unfaithful. He was proud, arrogant, defensive. Whenever something went wrong, he had a way of twisting it, bending it, shaping it into Laura's fault, Jake's fault, anyone's fault but his own. He believed he deserved more than the life he had. He believed he was underrated, underappreciated, and somehow trapped by the very family that had stood by him through every struggle. In his mind, the affair wasn't betrayal. It was escape, relief, a reward for surviving years of responsibilities he claimed weighed too heavily on him. But his worst flaw wasn't the cheating. It was his ability to manipulate. He could lie with a calm face, with steady eyes, with a voice that sounded almost convincing. He had spent years masking his selfishness behind a facade of politeness. And because Laura trusted him, because Jake adored him, his cracks stayed hidden far too long. Chloe, the mistress, wasn't just a young woman caught in the wrong place. She was part of Daniel's downfall, yes, but Daniel had invited every piece of it. He liked the attention she gave him, the way she laughed too loudly at his jokes, the way she made him feel powerful. Chloe didn't break him. She simply amplified who he secretly was. A man desperate for validation, no matter the cost. And when the scandal hit, when Jake's posts spread through school, community chat groups, and eventually Daniel's own company, Daniel panicked, but not for the reasons he should have. He didn't think about Jake's tears. He didn't think about Laura's shock. His first instinct was to protect himself. His reputation, his job, his standing in the corporate tower he worshipped more than his home. He stormed into Jake's room, demanding explanations, raising his voice, threatening punishment. He tried to intimidate his own son, the boy he had wounded most. And when Laura stepped between them, trembling but firm, Daniel accused her of turning Jake against him. And that was Daniel's nature. When cornered, he attacked the people who loved him instead of facing the truth of what he had done. He even attempted to call the school later that morning, insisting they monitor Jake's online behavior, attempting to shift the story so he appeared to be the responsible parent. But administrators had already seen the viral screenshot. No one missed the hotel name. No one missed the timestamp. What Daniel feared most, public shame, was spreading faster than he could control. And beneath that fear lay something darker: resentment. Resentment that his double life had been exposed by his own child. Resentment that Laura no longer looked at him with softness. Resentment that the consequences he had earned were closing in. Daniel was becoming smaller by the minute, cornered, defensive, unraveling. But the world was only beginning to see who he truly was. And the more he tried to fight the truth, the deeper he would sink into the pit he had dug for himself. Because the downfall of men like Daniel never happens in silence. It happens loudly, painfully, and in full view of everyone they once fooled. The first crack in Daniel's carefully maintained image didn't come from a whisper or a rumor. It came from a notification. At exactly 8:12 a.m., while he sat stiffly at the kitchen table, pretending nothing had happened, Jake's post, the GPS history with the hotel circled in bright red, began to explode across the internet. It started with a handful of classmates sharing it, then their parents, then neighbors. Within minutes, Laura's phone lit up with messages she didn't want to open. The caption hit harder than the map itself. "My hero." 2 words soaked in disappointment. 2 words that stripped Daniel of every fatherly title he had ever claimed. Laura's breath caught as the notifications chimed relentlessly. Group chats pinged, PTA moms texted. Even her coworker from the school nurse's office wrote, "Laura, are you okay?" She wasn't. Not even close. Meanwhile, Jake walked into school feeling like every pair of eyes in the hallway was piercing through him. Some kids smirked, others whispered, a few patted him on the shoulder in sympathy. But the cruelty came fast: screenshots, edited memes, jokes about his hotel dad. 14-year-olds could be ruthless, and it didn't take long for someone to say exactly what Jake feared most. "So your dad cheated, and you exposed him? Dude, that's messed up." He wanted to scream that he didn't mean for any of it to happen. He wanted to tell them he stayed up half the night crying. He wanted anyone to understand he didn't feel like a hero at all. He felt broken. By mid-morning, the post reached Daniel's corporate office in Manhattan. His coworkers gathered near the glass conference room, whispering as he walked past. Someone had the screenshot pulled up on their MacBook, trying to zoom in on the timestamp. The hotel name, a well-known luxury spot near Central Park, glowed across the screen like a confession. When Daniel entered his boss's office, Richard Hale was already holding a printed copy. He placed it on the desk with slow, deliberate disappointment. "Daniel," Richard said quietly, "this is circulating widely. Clients have seen it." Daniel's throat tightened, his hands trembled. "It's my private life," he snapped. "Not anymore," Richard replied, "and certainly not when your son posted it publicly." Daniel's temper flared. He accused coworkers of spreading lies. He demanded the HR department control the gossip. But everyone had already seen the evidence. Every step Daniel took across the office floor felt like walking on shattered glass, the fragments of his own doing. Back home, Laura faced her own public reckoning. While sorting through patient forms in the school nurse's clinic, a colleague gently asked, "Are you heading home early today? You look pale." That was the moment she knew she could no longer pretend her life was intact. During lunch, she stepped into the small staff bathroom, closed the door, and finally let the tears fall. She slid down the wall, holding her phone as more notifications appeared. Jake's teacher checking in, neighbors expressing shock, a distant cousin sending a long, dramatic voicemail. Laura felt exposed, raw, humiliated. It wasn't just a marital betrayal anymore, it was a public spectacle. But the cruelest moment came at 3:10 p.m. when Jake exited school and saw Daniel waiting for him in the parking lot, jaw clenched, hands shoved into his pockets, anger radiating from him like heat. "Get in the car," Daniel ordered through his teeth. Jake didn't move. Students watched, teachers watched. Laura, who had just arrived after clocking out early, watched. This wasn't a private fallout anymore. It was a public implosion, and every second of it was being witnessed by people who once thought the Millers were the perfect family. But the most devastating blow, the one that would shatter their remaining facade, hadn't happened yet. And when it did, there would be no pretending, no excuses, no way back. Jake didn't remember walking to the car. He didn't remember the way Daniel yanked the passenger door open, or the sharp click of the lock sliding down. All he remembered was the pressure in his chest, as if someone had wrapped a fist around his ribs and squeezed. The moment Daniel pulled out of the school parking lot, the shouting began. "What the hell were you thinking?" Daniel's voice cracked like a whip. "Posting that? Embarrassing this family? Embarrassing me?" Jake stared out the window, blinking rapidly. He wasn't going to cry, not in front of Daniel, not after everything. "I didn't embarrass anyone," he whispered. "You did." Daniel slammed his hand against the steering wheel, making Jake flinch. Cars honked behind them, but Daniel didn't care. His pride was bleeding, and Jake had struck the deepest wound. "You're a child," he growled. "You don't get to destroy my reputation, because you're emotional." Emotional. The same word Daniel always used on Laura, the same word he used whenever he refused to face the truth. When they arrived home, Daniel stormed inside first, pacing across the living room. Laura had followed them from the school, arriving a minute later. The moment she stepped through the door, Jake ran straight to her, burying his face in her chest like he used to when he was little. The tears he had been holding back finally broke loose. Laura held him, stroking his hair gently. "It's okay, baby. It's okay. I've got you." But nothing was okay. Daniel exploded again. "Get him off you, like he's 5 years old. Jake, you're acting ridiculous." "Enough, Daniel," Laura said softly but firmly. "He's a child. He's hurt." Daniel scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Maybe if you raised him to be tougher." Something in Laura snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a string pulled too tight that finally gave way. "Don't you dare blame him," she whispered. Jake pulled away from her, wiping his face with his sleeve. I need to go to my room," he stammered. And before either parent could answer, he rushed up the stairs. Laura followed him halfway, stopping when she heard his bedroom door close. She leaned against the wall, her legs trembling. She had seen Jake cry before scraped knees. Bad grades, childhood frustration, but never like this. This was a heartbreak cry. A betrayed cry. a cry that echoed through the house like a wound no one knew how to heal. Meanwhile, upstairs, Jake slid to the floor beside his bed, hugging his knees tightly. His breathing grew fast, too fast. His head spun. He tried to steady himself, but the panic surged again, hot, sharp, suffocating. His hands shook uncontrollably, nails digging into his palms. He didn't understand why it hurt so much. He had known something was wrong for months. He had seen the signs, but nothing prepared him for the confirmation. He was 14. And 14 was too young to learn your father chose someone else. Downstairs, Laura confronted Daniel. Her voice was soft, but it trembled like a candle in the wind. "He's not okay, Daniel. He's hurting." Daniel rubbed his forehead. "He'll get over it, kids do." "No," Laura said, "not this time. Today, and the reef and der wheat." For the first time, Daniel's expression faltered. Beneath the anger, beneath the arrogance, there was a flicker of uncertainty, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "Laura, you're blowing this out of proportion." She stepped closer, her voice cracking. "He had a panic attack, Daniel. I could see it. He's falling apart. And you're acting like he's just an inconvenience." Silence followed, heavy, sharp. But before Laura could say more, a loud crash echoed from upstairs, Jake knocking over something in his room. Laura ran. She found him hunched beside his dresser, breathing in ragged gasps, tear-stained and shaking uncontrollably. "Mom," he choked out. I can't. I don't know how to." She held him tightly, whispering, "I'm here. I'm right here." And as Daniel stood at the doorway, watching the two people he had hurt the most, something terrifying settled over the house. This wasn't just a mistake anymore. It was the beginning of a breakdown no one could hide. The house felt impossibly quiet the morning after Jake's collapse, as if every wall were listening. Laura barely slept. She sat at the edge of her bed, staring at the soft glow of the lamp, wondering how everything had fallen apart so fast. Daniel had left early, too early, claiming he needed space. She didn't argue. She didn't have the strength. Around mid-morning, Laura heard a knock at the door. Sharp. Intentional. She opened it to find her sister, Megan, standing on the porch in a tailored coat, holding a leather folder. Laura blinked in confusion. "Megan? I didn't call you." "No," her sister replied calmly, "but I saw the post. And I came as soon as I could. I sav, and after 7, to Olver." Megan stepped inside, closing the door with a click that felt like the start of something irreversible. Unlike Laura, Megan was steel-controlled, analytical, the kind of woman who never missed a detail. She placed the folder on the kitchen table and looked at her sister with quiet, unspoken worry. "Where's Jake?" "Sleeping," Laura whispered. "He had a panic attack." Megan sighed softly. "I'm sorry, Lau, truly, but there's something you need to know. Something I've been looking into for months." Laura froze. "What do you mean months?" Megan hesitated, just a beat. "I didn't want to worry you until I had proof. But Daniel hasn't just been distant, he's been reckless." Laura felt her stomach drop. "Reckless how?" Megan opened the folder. Inside were printed credit card statements, screenshots, emails, and something that made Laura's blood run cold. A hotel invoice from the very place Daniel stayed that night. Hours, room charges, bar tabs, everything laid out in numbers and dates. "Megan," Laura whispered, "how did you get these? Because the first time you told me he came home late, smelling like cologne that wasn't his, I called in a favor, a discreet one. I hoped I was wrong." Laura pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling again. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. And now I have it." Megan slid another paper forward. "This is worse. Tentris. 100 of divorce. 100. It was a reimbursement request Daniel had submitted at work, labeling a hotel dinner with Chloe as a client meeting. The total was staggering. He had charged the company for his affair. Laura inhaled sharply. "He used company money?" "Yes," Megan said. "And that's not all." She pulled up a digital file on her tablet, messages between Daniel and Chloe that someone from the office had forwarded anonymously after recognizing the hotel from Jake's viral post. Messages where Daniel bragged about playing the victim so Chloe would comfort him. Messages where he mocked Laura for never noticing anything. messages where he wrote, "Once my promotion hits, I'll have the leverage to walk away from her. Jake too, if I have to." Laura's knees nearly buckled. Megan caught her. "It gets even worse," she said softly. "Chloe isn't with him because she loves him, Laura. She's trying to climb the corporate ladder. And Daniel, he's been promising her that promotion will come." Laura felt something ignite inside her, not grief this time, but anger. A deep, molten anger she had never let herself feel. "But Lau," Megan continued, "there's one more thing." She opened a voice memo. A recording. Jake's voice. Daniel's voice. An argument from a week prior, captured unintentionally while Jake's phone was in his pocket. Daniel's voice was clear, sharp, cruel. "I didn't ask to be a father this young. I stayed because it looked good. Don't expect me to apologize for wanting more." Laura's breath shattered. "He told him he regretted being his father," she whispered. Megan nodded. "This recording, Laura, this could change everything. Legally, financially, custody, protection for Jake." Laura stared at the folder, the evidence, the betrayal, the truth finally exposed. The woman who sat there now was no longer the soft, forgiving Laura Miller. Something inside her had shifted, and Megan saw it. "Whatever you choose," Megan said gently, "you don't have to fight alone anymore." Because the twist Laura never expected was this. The truth had been gathering in the shadows long before the sunrise. Daniel came home, and now it was on her side. Laura stared at the folder long after Megan left, the afternoon sun sliding slowly across the kitchen floor as if time itself was hesitating. Every page inside that folder, every receipt, message, reimbursement form, felt like a blade. She wasn't just betrayed. She was used, mocked, strategized against. Her marriage had quietly turned into a battlefield she didn't even know she was standing on. But grief can only sit still for so long. Eventually, it shifts, it hardens, it focuses. By evening, something inside Laura had changed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was steady, like the click of a lock sliding shut. She would not fall apart anymore. Not for a man who had already replaced her in his mind. Not for someone who thought his family was a burden. Not for someone who didn't care if their son shattered under the weight of betrayal. She stepped into her bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out clothes she hadn't worn in years. Dark jeans, a clean-fitted blouse, shoes that made her stand taller. She straightened her hair, applied light makeup, and stared at herself in the mirror. For the first time in months, she saw the woman she used to be, the one with dreams, opinions, boundaries. The one Daniel had slowly chipped away at. Downstairs, she heard Jake stirring from his nap. She went to him gently, her voice warm but firm. "Jake, sweetheart, we're going out." He blinked sleepily. "Where?" "For help," she answered. "For both of us." She took him to a quiet counseling center recommended by one of her co-workers. The waiting room smelled faintly of lavender. Soft music played. Jake clung to her hand at first, but slowly, as the counselor spoke to him with patient kindness, Laura saw her son's shoulders loosen for the first time since the post went viral. On the drive home, Jake whispered, "Mom, are we gonna be okay?" Her voice didn't shake this time. "Yes, baby, we are." But the transformation didn't stop there. That night, Laura opened her old laptop and began to plan. Megan had told her the first step: documentation, evidence, preparation. She organized everything: screenshots, bank statements, the audio recording, and details from months of odd behavior Daniel thought she never noticed. She saved everything in a folder, clearly labeled, "For Jake." Not divorce, not evidence, not revenge. For Jake, because her transformation wasn't about punishing Daniel. It was about rebuilding safety for her son, for herself, for the home Daniel had nearly destroyed. The next morning, she woke early, brewed fresh coffee, and called the attorney Megan had recommended. Her voice was steady as she explained her situation, steady as she answered each legal question, steady as she confirmed she wanted to move forward. When she hung up, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: control. Later that afternoon, Laura drove to Jake's school to meet with the principal and counselor. She spoke clearly, calmly, outlining what had happened and what Jake had endured. The staff, already aware of the viral post, listened with compassion. By the end of the meeting, they arranged a support plan for Jake and flagged every teacher to keep an eye on him. Then came the moment Laura didn't expect. As she and Jake walked back to the car, Coach Harris, the baseball coach, approached them. He had always been gentle, always respectful. He cleared his throat softly. "Mrs. Miller," he said, "if Jake ever needs extra time at practice or someone to talk to, I'm here." Laura tried to smile, but her voice wavered. "Thank you, Coach. That means more than you know." He nodded, eyes warm, sincere, not prying, not judging, just kind. That kindness lingered with her all evening. By the time Daniel returned home, a storm brewing in his footsteps, he found a woman he didn't recognize. Not the fragile, apologetic Laura he'd spent years taking for granted. This Laura stood tall. This Laura spoke clearly. This Laura wasn't afraid. And when she looked Daniel in the eyes, he felt something he hadn't expected at all. Fear. Because Laura's transformation wasn't loud, but it was powerful. And he had no idea just how much stronger she was about to become. Daniel came home late, later than usual, as if delaying the confrontation would somehow make it disappear. But the house he walked into wasn't the same one he had left that morning. Laura wasn't sitting quietly at the kitchen table, waiting to be fed excuses. She stood near the counter, arms crossed, posture steady, as though she had rehearsed strength for months. Jake was upstairs, his bedroom light glowing softly behind the cracked door. "Laura, we need to talk," Daniel muttered, setting his briefcase down a little too loudly. "We will," she answered, "but not on your terms." Daniel frowned, confused by her tone. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm done being afraid of the truth." Before he could respond, the doorbell rang. Daniel froze. The timing was too sharp to be coincidence. Laura walked calmly to the door and opened it. A process server stood outside, holding a sealed envelope and a clipboard. "Daniel Miller?" the man asked. Daniel's face drained. What is this?" Laura didn't flinch. "It's acknowledgement of service. You need to sign." "If it my dress." "What did you do?" Daniel hissed, lowering his voice as if the neighbors might be listening. "I did what any mother would do," she said. "I protected our son." The server handed Daniel the envelope. Inside were separation papers, temporary custody filings, and financial requests backed by evidence Megan had helped compile. Daniel flipped through the documents in disbelief, each page slicing through his ego like a blade. "You're overreacting," he snapped. "Laura, think about Jake. This will embarrass him even more." Laura held his gaze. "The only person embarrassing him is you." Daniel's eyes darkened. "You think you can turn this on me? Everyone's already laughing at what Jake posted." Laura's expression didn't waver. "And they're about to see more." Before Daniel could ask, her phone chimed. She walked to the living room, where her laptop sat open, the blue glow of a scheduled live stream countdown ticking across the screen. Daniel's breath hitched. "What is that?" he demanded. "Transparency," she said simply. "You humiliated this family publicly. I'm correcting the story publicly." The stream went live on a private community group. Parents, teachers, neighbors, even co-workers who had already seen the viral GPS post. Laura didn't cry. She didn't shout. She spoke clearly, calmly, explaining Daniel's affair, the company expense, misuse, and most importantly, the emotional damage Jake suffered. She didn't mention Chloe by name, but she didn't need to. Anyone familiar with Daniel's office knew exactly who she was talking about. Daniel lunged toward her, whisper yelling, "Turn it off! You're ruining my career." She stepped away. "You ruined your own career." Then came the final blow. Jake stepped into frame. His voice trembled at first, but then steadied. "I didn't post the GPS to hurt anyone. I didn't know what else to do. I was tired of pretending." If his action. The comments section exploded with support. "You're so brave, Jake." "Daniel, seriously?" "Laura, stay strong. We're here for both of you." One message stuck out. "HR needs to see this." Daniel's jaw clenched. He looked like a man watching the ground crumble beneath him. When the stream ended, Laura closed the laptop quietly. Daniel stood speechless, his bravado gone. "You think this makes you look strong?" he spat. "You just destroyed me." Laura shook her head. "No, Daniel. You destroyed yourself. I simply stopped covering for you." At that moment, headlights appeared outside. Coach Harris's truck rolled slowly to a stop. He had come to check on Jake after hearing whispers around the school. Daniel watched as Jake stepped onto the porch and the coach placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Something in Daniel's eyes flickered, a mix of jealousy, fear, and the painful realization that he was no longer the protector of this household. Laura didn't look back at him, because her revenge wasn't loud. It was precise, public, and devastating in all the ways Daniel never saw coming. The days following the live stream moved like slow, deep waves. Each morning, Laura woke unsure how the world would react next, whether neighbors would whisper, whether school parents would stare, whether Daniel would explode again. But something unexpected happened instead. People reached out with kindness. Teachers emailed support for Jake. Parents sent meals. Neighbors left handwritten letters on the porch, quietly offering solidarity without prying. For the first time in months, Laura didn't feel alone. Jake, though still shaken, began to steady. Coach Harris checked in every afternoon, making sure Jake stayed connected to baseball practice, even if he mostly sat on the bench at first. One afternoon, Jake returned from school with a small grin, something Laura hadn't seen in weeks. "Coach said I pitched better today," he said softly. "He said he's proud of me." Laura hugged him, tears stinging her eyes. "I'm proud of you too." Meanwhile, Daniel's life crumbled with a speed he hadn't imagined. HR summoned him for questioning after anonymous employees forwarded Laura's live stream. The reimbursement fraud was undeniable. Chloe, sensing the sinking ship, immediately distanced herself. She denied everything, claiming Daniel misinterpreted their relationship. Daniel tried to defend himself, but every excuse sounded thinner than the last. Within days, he was placed on unpaid leave. Within weeks, he was terminated. The man who once strutted around his Manhattan office was now a shadow, avoiding neighbors, dodging calls, spiraling into the very isolation he had created for himself. He tried blaming Laura, Jake, social media hysteria, even Megan, but none of it changed the truth. Consequences had finally caught him. But Laura's focus wasn't revenge anymore. Her focus was rebuilding. She applied for advanced certification courses on her MacBook, determined to grow her work in school health services. She painted the guest room a soft sage green, turning it into her small sanctuary, a place where she could read, breathe, and imagine life without fear. She started journaling before bed, writing letters to herself the way she wished someone had written to her years earlier. Letters reminding her she mattered. One evening, weeks later, she attended Jake's baseball game. The sky glowed a warm orange, the air filled with shouts and laughter. Parents lined the bleachers. Laura sat alone at first, nervous about the stares she imagined would come. But they didn't. Instead, two moms sat beside her, asking if she needed company. A dad handed her a coffee. Someone else placed a blanket across her knees when the wind picked up. And then, as the game began, Coach Harris approached. He stood beside her, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, eyes soft. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked. "Of course not," she whispered. They watched the game in comfortable silence. When Jake struck out a player with a clean, perfect pitch, Laura clapped, cheering louder than anyone. Coach Harris smiled at the pride in her voice. "He's getting stronger," he said. "So am I," she replied quietly. He looked at her not with pity, not with curiosity, but with genuine respect. A warmth spread across Laura's chest, something she hadn't felt in years. Safety, admiration. A beginning, not a replacement. When the game ended, Jake ran over, breathless and smiling. He threw his arms around her. "Did you see that pitch?" "I saw everything," Laura said, laughing softly. Coach Harris placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. "You keep this up, kid. You're starting next season." Jake beamed. As they walked to the car, Jake looked up at her. "Mom?" "Yes, honey? We're gonna be okay, right?" Laura didn't hesitate. "We already are." She glanced back once more. Daniel stood far across the field, alone, watching them. No one approached him. No one waved. His consequences had arrived in full. Laura took a deep breath of the evening air. She didn't hate him anymore. She didn't fear him. She didn't need closure from him. She had rebuilt herself. She had protected her son. She had found community, strength, and the possibility of new love. And as the last light of day faded, Laura realized something powerful. Sometimes, losing the wrong person is the beginning of getting everything you deserve. The weeks following Jake's baseball victory felt strangely quiet, like the air after a storm that had ripped a whole town apart. The miller's house was no longer a battleground, but the silence carried its own kind of heaviness, one that comes after truth has blown every door off its hinges. Laura found herself moving through the days with a soft steadiness, rebuilding routines brick by brick. Yet, even as she settled into the new rhythm, the aftershocks of Daniel's downfall continued to shake their lives in unexpected ways. One Friday morning, as Laura was packing Jake's lunch, she received an email from the school district requesting a meeting. Her heart tightened, fearing Jake might be facing another wave of bullying. But when she arrived, she found the principal, 2 counselors, and the athletic director waiting with gentle smiles. "Mrs. Miller," the principal began, "we've been incredibly impressed with how you handled everything. And more importantly, how Jake has handled it." He slid a form across the table. "We'd like to nominate him for the district's Resilience Award." Laura's eyes widened. "Jake, are you sure?" "Absolutely," the counselor said. "His willingness to speak openly about emotional struggle has encouraged other students to seek help. That kind of courage matters more than perfect grades." Laura left the school blinking back tears, hugging the folder to her chest. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel like a dark tunnel. It felt like a sunrise. But every sunrise casts shadows too. That afternoon, Daniel showed up unannounced. His once confident posture had collapsed into something smaller, hunched, almost desperate. He stood in the doorway, unshaven, wearing a wrinkled jacket that still smelled faintly of the cologne he used to impress Chloe. "Laura, can we talk?" he murmured. She didn't invite him in. She stepped outside instead, closing the door halfway behind her. The porch felt colder with him standing there. "I lost my job," he said abruptly. "And Chloe, she's not answering my calls. Everyone thinks I'm some kind of monster." Laura crossed her arms. "Daniel, you built that image yourself." He inhaled sharply. "I know. I need help." "Help with what?" He hesitated. "Money, a chance to see Jake, anything." The old Laura, the one who worried about everyone else before herself, would have folded. She would have offered comfort, sympathy, maybe even a plan. But the woman standing on that porch now had boundaries, strong ones. "I'll discuss visitation with my lawyer," she said calmly. "But emotionally, Daniel, you have to rebuild yourself. I can't do it for you anymore." He swallowed, eyes shining with humiliation. "Does he hate me?" "No," Laura said softly, "but he doesn't trust you." Daniel's face crumbled. For a moment, he looked like the man she married, lost, scared, human. But the damage was already carved too deep. Trust isn't rebuilt by tears on a doorstep. Later that evening, Jake watched from the living room window, shoulders tense. "Is he coming back?" he asked quietly. "Not to live here," Laura answered gently. "But he'll have a chance to be part of your life. When you're ready, not before." Jake nodded, relief mixing with uncertainty. Just then, a car pulled into the driveway, Coach Harris. He stepped out, offering Jake a fist bump, and Laura a small, warm smile. "Thought I'd drop off the team schedule," he said, handing her a folded paper. "And maybe you both could join us for pizza after practice tomorrow?" Jake lit up immediately. Laura felt her heart flutter, a small, unexpected flicker of warmth that didn't feel guilty or complicated, just possible. "We'd like that," she said. As Coach Harris walked back to his truck, Jake leaned close and whispered, "Mom, I think he likes you." Laura laughed softly. "Maybe. But let's take life one step at a time, okay?" Jake nodded, looping his arm around hers. And as the porch light glowed against the quiet night, Laura realized this truth. Her story wasn't about surviving Daniel anymore. It was about discovering herself and building a future that finally felt safe. The next week arrived with a strange tension in the air, an almost tangible pull between the life Laura was trying to build and the chaos Daniel kept dragging behind him. She hoped things would settle, that the distance between them would create some peace. But consequences never travel alone. They always bring echoes. On Monday morning, Laura received a call from Jake's school counselor, Mrs. Miller. "Jake had a rough start today. He seemed distracted and agitated. We just wanted you to be aware." Laura's heart tightened. When she picked him up later, Jake walked slowly toward the car, shoulders slumped beneath his backpack. "Hard day?" she asked softly. He shrugged. "Some kids said, 'My dad's a loser,' and one kid said, 'I'm just like him.'" Laura reached over and squeezed his hand. You are nothing like him, Jake. Nothing. But that night, she heard him crying into his pillow quietly, trying to hide it. She sat beside him, stroking his back until he fell asleep. Her son was hurting, deeper than before, and no legal document could fix that. Meanwhile, Daniel continued slipping. He texted Laura at odd hours, long paragraphs, apologies mixed with blame, desperation mixed with denial. One message read, "If you had just supported me more, none of this would have happened." Another said, "Tell Jake I'm still his father. He can't just erase me." Laura didn't reply. Every message was a reminder that Daniel wasn't mourning his marriage, he was mourning his lost control. By midweek, Daniel escalated. He showed up unannounced again, pounding on the door until Laura reluctantly stepped outside. "You're turning him against me," he snapped. "No," she said calmly. "Your actions are." Daniel's voice grew louder. "I need to see him." "When it's arranged properly," she replied, "not like this." Then came the blow she didn't expect. Daniel stepped closer, voice trembling with anger. "You think you're better than me now? You think that coach makes you strong? You should be thanking me. I stayed as long as I did." The words stung, not because she believed them, but because she remembered the years she once did. "Please leave," Laura said, finally raising her voice. "This is not good for Jake." Daniel looked at her with something sharp and unsettling, a mix of resentment and desperation. "If you take him from me," he whispered, "I'll make sure everyone knows you're unstable." She didn't answer. She simply closed the door. For hours afterward, she shook. That night, after Jake fell asleep, Laura sat alone at the kitchen table, her trembling hands wrapped around a warm mug. She felt the weight of the world pressing on her chest, fear for her son, exhaustion from fighting, and the lingering sting of Daniel's cruelty. She felt like she was drowning in two lives at once, the one she left behind and the one she was painfully trying to rebuild. It was close to midnight when her phone buzzed. A message from Coach Harris. "Heard Daniel caused a scene today. If you and Jake need anything, ride, company, help, I'm here." Laura stared at the message, tears gathering. Not from sadness this time, but from the unexpected relief of having someone in her corner. The next day at practice, Coach Harris pulled Jake aside, speaking gently. Later, Jake told her, "Coach said some storms make people stronger." He said, "I'm one of the strongest kids he knows." That night, Jake smiled a little as he did homework. Laura sat across from him, watching the quiet glow return to his eyes. For a moment, the house felt warm again. But Laura knew one truth with painful clarity. Daniel wasn't done causing damage. And the next shock, the one already forming in the shadows, would hit harder than anything before. The breaking point came on a Thursday night, quiet, ordinary, the kind of night no one expects danger to slip in. Laura had just finished washing dishes when she realized she hadn't heard Jake's voice for over an hour. The house felt too still, too empty. She checked his room. The bed was neatly made, his backpack was gone, his sneakers were missing. Her heartbeat stuttered. "Jake?" she called out, louder this time. Silence answered. Panic rose in her throat like a wave. She checked the backyard, the garage, even the bathroom. Nothing. Then she saw the space where the keys to the old Toyota used to hang. They were gone. "Oh God," she whispered, gripping the doorframe. Her hands shook violently as she grabbed her phone and dialed his number. It rang once, twice, and then went straight to voicemail. "Jake, honey, please call me, just tell me where you are," she pleaded, voice cracking. She called again. Voicemail. Fear sliced through her like ice. She dialed Megan next. Her sister answered on the first ring. "Laura? What's wrong?" "It's Jake," Laura choked. "He's gone. The car is gone." "I'm coming," Megan said immediately. "Stay outside so I can find you." While waiting, Laura paced the porch, breath shallow, mind spiraling through every terrible possibility. Jake was only 14. He had barely recovered from the panic attack. What if something happened on the road? What if he was too distraught to think clearly? What if he believed Daniel's cruel words and blamed himself? Moments later, Megan's car pulled in. Laura climbed in, trembling. "We search every route he might take," Megan said firmly, merging onto the main road. "We'll find him." If at night 9, they drove through the darkened streets past Jake's school, the baseball field, the convenience store where he sometimes bought snacks. Each place was painfully empty. Laura's phone buzzed with a text. For a split second, hope flared in her chest. But it wasn't Jake. It was Daniel. "Why are you calling me? I'm busy." Laura's vision blurred with fury. She typed back with shaking fingers. "Jake is missing." Daniel didn't reply. As the night deepened, the fear tightened around Laura's chest like a vice. They checked every street Jake might have taken, but the Toyota was nowhere. Laura's breathing grew ragged. "We need help," Megan said quietly. "Laura, we're calling the police." Minutes later, 2 officers arrived, calm yet serious. They took Jake's photo, license plate number, and last known emotional state. Laura's voice cracked as she explained the bullying at school, the panic attack, Daniel's meltdown. "We'll put out an alert," one officer assured her. "We'll find him." But reassurance did nothing to soothe the terror clawing through her. 2 agonizing hours passed. Then the call came. A patrol car had spotted the Toyota parked near the Hudson River, overlook a quiet place where drivers often sat to think. Laura's heart collapsed. She imagined the worst. She imagined every fear a mother could hold. They raced to the location. As they pulled up, a police cruiser idled behind the Toyota. Laura jumped out before the car even stopped. "Jake!" she screamed. An officer guided her forward. "He's okay." Shaken, but okay. Laura rounded the Toyota and saw him sitting on the curb, arms wrapped around his knees, eyes swollen from crying. He looked so small in the dim glow of the streetlights. "Mom," he whispered, voice cracking. "I'm sorry. I couldn't breathe at home. I felt like everything was my fault. If you Mevin." Laura fell to her knees and pulled him into her arms, sobbing into his hair. "No, baby, none of this is your fault, not one piece of it." Jake clung to her, shaking. "I didn't want to disappear. I just wanted the noise to stop." Megan stood behind them, tears silently sliding down her face. Laura held Jake tighter, whispering over and over, "You're safe. You're safe. I've got you. If you too." And as she cradled her trembling son on that cold river road, she felt a fierce, unbroken truth rise inside her. Daniel's chaos would no longer define their lives because nothing mattered more than protecting the boy in her arms. And she would fight the whole world if she had to. The morning after the Hudson River incident felt different, not lighter, not easier, but clearer. Laura woke before sunrise, her heartbeat still unsteady from the night's fear, and checked on Jake. He was curled under his blankets, breathing softly, his cheeks still stained from dried tears. She brushed his hair gently and kissed his forehead. For the first time in weeks, he didn't flinch at her touch. Downstairs, Megan sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, her eyes tired but alert. "You should sleep," Laura whispered. Megan shook her head. "Not until you do, but first, you two need more help than I alone can give." Laura sat across from her, spine stiffening. "Therapy?" "Not just therapy," Megan said softly. "Family support. Accountability, stability. Jake is carrying too much alone." Laura nodded slowly. The truth was painful but undeniable. Jake wasn't just shaken, he was unraveling, thread by thread. And she was barely holding herself together. Later that morning, when Jake woke up, Laura sat on the edge of his bed. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "I want us to talk to someone. Together. Someone who can help us breathe again." "I'd great." Jake swallowed, eyes darting away. "Am I broken?" "No," Laura whispered, pulling him into her arms. "You're hurting, and healing doesn't happen alone." By noon, they sat in a quiet counseling office, soft chairs, warm lighting, the faint scent of chamomile tea drifting through the air. Their therapist, Dr. Ellen Parker, was a calm woman with kind eyes who didn't rush them. She spoke softly, the kind of voice that made words feel like a blanket rather than a demand. Jake hesitated at first, fidgeting with his sleeve, but when Dr. Parker asked, "What scared you most last night?" he exhaled shakily and answered, "That they'd be better without me." Laura's breath cracked. She reached for his hand. Dr. Parker leaned forward. "Jake, feelings don't tell the whole story. They whisper fears, not truths. And your truth is this: you matter enormously. To your mom, your teammates, your community." Jake nodded, though tears slid down his face. Then came the question Laura wasn't expecting. "Jake, do you feel safe around your father?" Jake froze. Laura froze. After a long moment, he whispered, "Not really. Not anymore." Laura's heart broke all over again. But this time, the breaking didn't crush her. It fortified her. Dr. Parker turned to Laura. You need clear boundaries with Daniel. His presence is destabilizing for both of you. Laura inhaled. I know, and I'm ready. And do ever. The session laid the foundation of something Laura hadn't felt in years: direction. A roadmap out of chaos. A plan toward healing rather than survival. When they left the office, the air felt lighter. Jake walked a little straighter. Laura's shoulders loosened. And for the first time since the GPS post, they weren't moving through pain, they were moving forward. That evening, Jake surprised her. He sat beside her on the couch and rested his head on her shoulder. Thanks for not giving up on me, he murmured. I never will, she whispered. Just then, her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. I'm coming by, we need to talk. Laura's heart didn't race this time. She stood, walked to the front door, stepped outside before Daniel could even knock. No, she said firmly. Not tonight, not here, not without a mediator. Daniel stared at her, stunned by her new strength. What's happening to you? He muttered. I started healing, she answered. You should try it. She closed the door without guilt. Later that night, after Jake went to bed, Laura stepped onto the porch, sipping tea and staring into the quiet street. The air, though cool, felt peaceful. She didn't know every step of the journey ahead. But she knew this. The healing had started, and nothing Daniel did could stop it now. The day Laura officially filed the separation papers felt strangely calm, too calm, as if the universe was holding its breath. She had spent the morning preparing documents, reviewing Megan's notes, and double-checking every screenshot that proved Daniel's misuse of company funds. Each piece of evidence was like a puzzle piece snapping into place, forming a picture she could no longer ignore. She wasn't acting out of anger anymore. She was acting out of necessity, out of love for Jake, and out of respect for the woman she was becoming. That afternoon, she sat in the attorney's office, a modest but tidy space decorated with framed certificates and soft-toned art. The attorney, Miss Carter, flipped through the folder Megan had helped assemble and nodded with a mixture of approval and quiet concern. You've done everything right, Laura, she said, and given the evidence, the affair, the financial misconduct, the emotional instability, it's in your best interest to proceed with full, temporary custody and limited unsupervised contact. Laura swallowed. I don't want to punish him. I just want Jake safe. And that, Miss Carter replied, is why the court will take your side. By the time Laura signed the final page, her hands were steady. A strange strength flowed through her, a strength she didn't recognize but welcomed. Now, the attorney said gently, this next part is difficult. Daniel needs to be served in person. Laura nodded. She knew. But fate had its own timing. Daniel was scheduled to attend a mandatory staff meeting at the Manhattan office that afternoon, the same office where every whisper and raised eyebrow had followed him for weeks. Miss Carter arranged for a process server to deliver the envelope during the meeting. It was legal, it was clean, and it was public. As Laura drove home, her phone buzzed. A short message from Megan. It's happening. Meanwhile, inside Daniel's sleek office tower, the conference room buzzed with low conversations. Employees pretended to focus on presentations, though everyone in the building had heard about Daniel's suspension, his argument with HR, and the viral GPS post. He walked in late, face tight, jaw clenched, avoiding eye contact. Richard, his supervisor, barely glanced at him before continuing the meeting. Slides about ethics, conduct, and corporate transparency glowed across the wall, ironic, almost cruelly fitting. Halfway through the presentation, the door opened. A man in a dark blazer stepped inside, quiet but authoritative. Daniel Miller? He asked. Daniel blinked, confused. Yes? The man extended an envelope. You've been served. A gasp rippled around the room. Papers rustled. Someone coughed. Daniel froze, color draining from his face as he accepted the envelope with a trembling hand. What is this? He snapped, though he already knew. The process server gave a polite nod and exited. Daniel tore the envelope open, eyes scanning the pages, separation papers, temporary custody, financial disclosures, formal allegations of misconduct. The humiliation hit him as sharply as a slap. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered, voice cracking. She wouldn't actually, but she did. Richard's voice broke the silence. Daniel, I think you should step outside. Daniel looked around the room. Every coworker avoided his gaze. Chloe was nowhere in sight. She had taken a leave of absence days earlier, suddenly uninterested in the man whose promotion she had hoped to ride into. Daniel walked out slowly, the envelope crumpled in his fist. Back in New Jersey, Laura stood on the porch, a cup of tea warming her hands. She wasn't triumphant, she wasn't spiteful. She simply felt relieved, like a knot had finally loosened in her chest. Jake opened the door behind her. Mom, are we okay? She turned and hugged him tightly. We're going to be more than okay. For the first time, she believed it. And somewhere in Manhattan, Daniel sank onto a cold office bench, realizing something his ego had never allowed him to see. The woman he underestimated, the woman he dismissed, the woman he betrayed, had just taken back her power completely. The shockwaves from the courthouse papers hadn't even settled when another thread of Daniel's double life began to unravel, this time through Chloe, the woman he once believed would be his fresh start. She had carefully kept her distance ever since the live stream, claiming she needed space while Daniel spiraled. But the truth was simpler. She had seen the consequences coming and didn't want to be anywhere near them when they landed. Chloe lived in a compact Brooklyn apartment overlooking a noisy street filled with cafes and commuters. Normally, she enjoyed the chaos. It made her feel alive, important, part of a fast-moving world. But lately, she felt trapped. Every buzz of her phone made her flinch. Every unfamiliar knock on her door made her heart race. She hadn't been sleeping well. She hadn't been working well either. That morning, she opened her inbox to find an email with a subject line that made her stomach drop. Subpoena, notice, required documentation. Her hands shook as she clicked it open. Laura's attorney had formally requested her messages, call logs, and financial exchanges with Daniel. The company had also been notified. HR had CC'd her. Suddenly, Chloe felt the room tilt. No, she whispered. No, no, no. But there was no escape now. Daniel's lies, his promises, his manipulation, his bragging were all preserved in text. And Chloe knew exactly how damning those messages would look in court. She didn't want to protect him. Not anymore. Not after he started blaming her for his suspension. Not after he yelled at her over the phone, accusing her of taking Megan's side. Not after he claimed she had trapped him in the affair. She remembered the moment clearly. She had been at her kitchen counter, holding her phone while Daniel ranted, and for the first time she realized she didn't feel sympathy, she felt disgust. The man she once thought charming now sounded like a sinking ship, pulling everything down with him. That afternoon, she received a text from Megan Miller herself. We can set up a meeting. You may want legal guidance. End quote. Chloe read the message 3 times, her pulse pounding. Meeting with the sister of the woman whose life she helped destroy? The idea made her nauseous. But something stronger pushed through her guilt, self-preservation. 2 hours later, she sat at a quiet corner table inside a Starbucks near Grand Central. Megan entered with a calm confidence that instantly filled the room. She didn't glare, didn't sneer. She simply sat down and placed a folder on the table. Chloe, Megan said, voice cool but controlled. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Chloe swallowed hard. I didn't have much choice. You do, Megan replied. You always have choices. Today, you choose whether you protect the truth or continue Daniel's lies. Chloe lowered her gaze. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. Megan raised an eyebrow. Then now is your chance to help fix what you can. Chloe hesitated only a moment before reaching into her bag and pulling out a flash drive. These are the messages. All of them. Even the ones that make me look bad. Megan nodded, accepting it without judgment. This will help Jake more than anything. Something inside Chloe cracked. Is he okay? The kid? Megan's voice softened. He will be, but he's been through hell. Chloe looked away, guilt twisting in her chest. Daniel said he'd leave if I didn't stay quiet. He said he'd blame me for everything. Megan leaned forward. He would, but not anymore. He doesn't get to manipulate you or anyone else again. Chloe blinked fast, brushing away a tear she didn't expect. Just do what you need to do. I'm done with him. As Megan stood to leave, she paused. Chloe? I hope you learn from this, but I also hope you find a better life than the one Daniel sold you. Chloe nodded, voice barely a whisper. So do I. That evening, As Megan placed the flash drive on Laura's kitchen table, Laura exhaled slowly. The evidence was complete, and the woman who once threatened her marriage was now helping secure her freedom. Because even Chloe, young, ambitious, misguided, had finally seen what Laura already knew. Daniel's destruction was inevitable, and anyone who stayed close to him would burn. The mediation room was colder than Laura expected, a wide, neutral space with tall windows, a polished conference table, and chairs that looked more expensive than they felt. Laura sat on one side with Megan and Miss Carter, her attorney. Jake wasn't allowed inside, but he waited in a nearby room with a counselor. Laura's heart ached, knowing he was only a few doors away, carrying burdens no 14-year-old should ever know. On the opposite side of the table sat Daniel and his lawyer, a sharp-looking man in a navy suit who adjusted his tie every few minutes as if the fabric were strangling him. Daniel looked smaller than ever, unkempt hair, dark circles, nervous tapping of his foot. He forced a smirk when he saw Laura, as if pretending he still held power. "Let's begin," the mediator said, a neutral woman with glasses perched low on her nose. Miss Carter spoke first. "Mrs. Miller is requesting full physical custody of Jake, supervised visitation for Mr. Miller, temporary spousal support due to his financial misconduct, and restrictions regarding Jake's exposure to conflict." Daniel scoffed loudly. "Supervised visitation? Are you kidding me?" He leaned forward. "Laura, this is childish. You're blowing things way out of proportion." Megan placed a hand gently on Laura's arm to keep her calm. Miss Carter slid a folder across the table. "We have evidence, Mr. Miller." Daniel's lawyer opened the folder and instantly stiffened. Inside were Chloe's messages, screenshots of Daniel mocking his wife, mocking his son, messages where he bragged about charging hotel dinners to the company, messages where he threatened to leave his family once he secured a top position. Daniel's face went red, then pale. "These are taken out of context." "No," Megan said coolly, "they're not. And there's more." She clicked a button on her iPad. The audio recording of Daniel and Jake's argument played through the room's speakers. Daniel's voice echoed sharply. "I stayed because it looked good. Don't expect me to apologize for wanting more." Silence followed. Daniel swallowed, looking at the table, shame creeping up his neck. Even his lawyer exhaled heavily. The mediator cleared her throat. "Mr. Miller, this recording is extremely concerning." Daniel's lawyer leaned toward him and whispered harshly, "You didn't tell me they had this." Daniel hissed back, "I didn't know he recorded it." Miss Carter continued, her tone steady. Additionally, the school provided statements detailing the emotional toll on Jake, the bullying following the viral post, his panic attack, his disappearance. His mental health is fragile. Mr. Miller's presence has been a triggering factor. Daniel slammed his fists onto the table. "You're turning my son against me." Laura finally spoke, her voice calm but strong. "No, Daniel. You did that yourself." For a moment, Daniel's eyes softened, not in humility, but in fear. He looked as if he finally realized he was losing something he could never replace. The mediator turned pages, taking notes. "Given the totality of evidence, I recommend full temporary custody to Mrs. Miller. Mr. Miller will have weekly supervised visits until a further psychological evaluation is completed." Daniel shot to his feet. "This is insane." His lawyer tugged him back down. "Sit. If you escalate, you'll lose even more." Megan couldn't hide her smirk. The mediator continued. "Lastly, Jake has expressed a clear preference regarding where he feels safe." As if on cue, the door opened, and Jake stepped in, nervous but determined. His counselor stood beside him. The mediator smiled gently. "Jake, you may speak if you'd like." Jake looked at Daniel, then at Laura. His voice trembled. I just want to live with my mom. She listens. She doesn't yell. She doesn't scare me." Daniel's face crumpled. "Jake, buddy." Jake stepped back from him instinctively. That one movement said everything. The mediator closed her folder. "The decision is clear." Laura squeezed Jake's hand, tears filling her eyes, but this time, they weren't from fear, they were from relief. Daniel sat slumped, defeated, finally understanding that charm, lies, and manipulation had no place left to hide. The family he thought he controlled was no longer his to break. And for the first time, the power belonged entirely to Laura and Jake. Autumn arrived quietly, brushing New Jersey with crisp wind and streets lined with amber leaves. For Laura and Jake, the season marked the beginning of a new chapter, one shaped not by survival, but by slow, intentional healing. Life didn't magically fix itself overnight. But day by day, the sharp edges softened, replaced by small victories that felt like sunlight after a long storm. Jake began therapy twice a week, and for the first time since the GPS post, his shoulders no longer stayed tense all the time. He didn't flinch at unexpected sounds. He slept through the night. His therapist helped him untangle the knots in his heart, feelings of abandonment, anger, confusion, and guilt he had carried long before the viral explosion exposed the truth. One afternoon, when Laura picked him up, he slid into the passenger seat holding a worksheet filled with scribbled notes. "Mom," he said, voice quiet but proud, "Dr. Parker says, I'm getting better at identifying my emotions." Laura smiled, her chest warming. "I can see that." And she said, "I'm allowed to be mad at Dad without feeling bad about it." She reached over and squeezed his hand. "You're allowed to feel anything you need to feel." Meanwhile, Laura was healing in her own ways. She enrolled in evening classes on her refurbished laptop courses on child development and school mental health. With every lesson, she grew more confident, more certain of the path she wanted. Not just for employment, but for purpose. At home, she repainted the living room with Jake's help. They picked a soft shade of blue, peaceful blue, Jake called it. Each brushstroke felt symbolic, covering the memories of emotional chaos with fresh beginnings. They hung new photos too. Jake pitching at practice, Laura laughing with her sister, snapshots from hikes they'd started taking every Saturday morning to reset their minds. But the biggest shift came unexpectedly through moments that felt small at first. Coach Harris didn't pull away after the mediation showdown. If anything, he became a steady, grounding presence. He made sure Jake always had a ride to practice if Laura was working late. He invited them to post-game dinners with the whole team. He checked on Jake's progress without overstepping. One evening after practice, he pulled Laura aside. "You know," he said softly, "Jake's got a lot of strength. That doesn't happen by accident. That's you." Laura felt her cheeks warm. "I'm just trying my best." "You're doing better than that." The compliment lingered with her long after she drove home. Not in a romantic way, at least not yet, but in a healing way, like someone seeing her clearly for the first time in years. Meanwhile, Daniel struggled. Mediation had stripped away the illusions he'd clung to. Supervised visits were awkward and short. Jake barely spoke. Daniel tried apologizing, offering gifts, even making promises he couldn't keep. But Jake remained distant, polite yet guarded. Laura didn't sabotage their relationship, but she didn't force it either. Healing couldn't be manipulated or rushed. Daniel had to earn every inch back himself. By November, he stopped trying to control the narrative. Maybe it was the therapy the court recommended. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe he finally realized the damage he'd caused. But gradually, he showed up quieter, less angry. One supervised session ended with Daniel whispering to Laura, "I didn't realize how much I hurt him. How much I hurt you." Laura met his eyes calmly. "We're not your responsibility anymore, Daniel, but you can still choose to be a better father." He nodded, wiping his eyes before Jake returned from the restroom. These moments didn't erase the past. They didn't restore trust. But they added balance to a story that had been unbalanced for too long. Healing wasn't about pretending the hurt never happened. It was about building something new from the pieces left behind. By December, Laura walked into the winter air with a sense of quiet strength. Jake jogged ahead, laughing as snowflakes dusted his hair. Coach Harris waved from across the parking lot. Megan called every night to check on them. The world wasn't perfect, but it was steady. And steadiness, Laura realized, was its own kind of miracle. Because healing didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it rebuilt. And sometimes it arrived exactly when she thought she no longer deserved it. Winter arrived with sharp winds and gray skies, the kind that made the air feel heavy with something unspoken. By then, life for Laura and Jake had settled into a gentle routine: therapy, sessions, baseball practices, quiet dinners filled with healing instead of tension. But for Daniel, everything was unraveling faster than he could hide. His job was gone, his confidence shattered, his reputation bruised beyond repair. Still, Daniel clung to one last hope. The Community Leadership Award. He'd been nominated for months earlier, back when his image was spotless and everyone believed he was a dedicated family man. The ceremony would be held in a grand downtown hotel ballroom, not quite the plaza, but close enough that the chandeliers sparkled like stars and the Manhattan skyline shimmered through the tall windows. Daniel begged Jake to attend with him. "It'll help my image," he said. "People will see things are normal." Laura overheard and stepped in immediately. "Jake doesn't need to fix your image, Daniel." But Jake surprised her. "Mom, I want to go. I need to see something." Laura studied his eyes. They were steady, not scared. This wasn't weakness, it was closure. So they went. Laura and Jake arrived separately from Daniel, choosing a table at the back of the ballroom. Soft music played from a string quartet. Waiters floated between the tables, carrying trays of sparkling water and hors d'oeuvres. The room was filled with polished shoes, tailored suits, shimmering dresses, every detail meant to impress. When Daniel entered, he did so with the stiff posture of a man pretending he hadn't lost everything. People whispered, but not in admiration. Heads tilted, eyes narrowed. They had all seen the live stream. They had all heard the recording at Mediation. Daniel's fall was not a secret. He approached Laura and Jake with a stiff smile. "Thanks for coming," he muttered. Jake didn't look at him. Laura simply nodded politely. The program began with speeches from community leaders. Then came Daniel's category, Outstanding Community Leadership. The announcer called his name. Daniel walked to the stage, shoulders square, trying desperately to salvage dignity. He stood behind the podium, adjusting the microphone. The lights washed over him, exposing every crack in his facade. "Thank you," he began, voice wavering. "I appreciate this recognition." People shifted uneasily. A few exchanged knowing looks. "I've always believed in integrity," he continued, and the irony of the word echoed like thunder. "In being a good father, a good husband." Jake suddenly pushed his chair back. Laura turned. "Honey, are you okay?" Jake's face was pale but determined. "Mom, I can't sit here while he lies again." "Dad, I hope her, Azaver." Before Laura could stop him, Jake stood and walked toward the exit, slow, deliberate, visible to everyone. Once he moved, something unexpected happened. Two of his teammates rose from a nearby table and followed him. Then another, and another. People murmured. Attention shifted from Daniel to the line of kids leaving the ballroom. Daniel faltered at the microphone. Jake, come back." But Jake didn't turn around. Laura stood next, not rushing, not dramatic, simply rising with quiet dignity. The room watched as she followed her son, her steps steady and composed, her presence stronger than any spotlight. The announcer whispered urgently to someone backstage. The quartet stopped playing. A waiter froze mid-motion. Daniel stood frozen at the podium, watching the two people whose love he once took for granted walk out of the room without hesitation and without him. The humiliation washed over him in full force. Outside the ballroom, under the glow of city lights, Jake finally exhaled. "I needed that," he whispered. Laura wrapped her arm around him. "You did the right thing." A familiar truck pulled up to the curb, Coach Harris, who'd been waiting to drive them home. He hopped out, giving Jake a proud nod and offering Laura a warm, steady smile. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. Laura looked back at the glowing windows of the ballroom, where Daniel stood alone in a room full of people. Then she looked at Coach Harris' kind eyes, patient heart, and felt something settle peacefully inside her. "Yes," she said softly, "everything's finally okay." Because tonight wasn't just Daniel's reckoning. It was Laura and Jake reclaiming the dignity he tried so hard to steal. Snow began to fall the week after the awards ceremony, soft flakes drifting through the air like the world was finally ready to lay a blanket over everything that had happened. For Laura and Jake, it marked a turning point, a chapter about closure rather than conflict, healing rather than surviving. The chaos Daniel once brought into their home no longer ruled their days. It lingered only as a distant echo, fading more with every sunrise. On a quiet Saturday morning, Laura found Jake sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by scattered photographs, old birthdays, beach trips, school plays, memories of a family that looked whole but felt fractured even back then. "You okay?" she asked gently. Jake nodded, picking up a picture of him on Daniel's shoulders at age 5. "I used to think he was perfect," he said softly. "I didn't know parents could mess up this bad." Laura sat beside him. Parents aren't superheroes, sweetheart. They're just people. And sometimes, people choose the wrong path. He looked up at her, eyes clearer than they had been in months. I don't want to hate him anymore. I just don't want him to hurt me again. Tears warmed Laura's eyes, but she held his face between her hands and whispered, "That's strength, Jake. That's what healing looks like." Later that afternoon, they bundled up in coats and walked to the park. Fresh snow covered the ground, muffling the world into a peaceful hush. Jake tossed snowballs into the frozen pond, each splash gentler than the last. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't lost. He was mending. When they returned home, Daniel was waiting outside, hands shoved into his pockets, shoulders slumped, breath visible in the cold. He looked smaller than ever, like a man who had finally run out of excuses. "Laura, Jake, can we talk?" he asked quietly. Jake stepped closer to his mom, but he didn't hide. "What is it, Daniel?" Laura asked. He swallowed hard. "I won't stay long. I wanted to say I'm sorry, not the kind of sorry that asks for anything back. Just sorry." Jake looked at him, eyes steady. "Dad, I'm not ready to spend time with you." "Not yet." Daniel nodded, accepting it. "I understand. I'll wait however long it takes." Infection, about the 7. Laura wasn't ready to forgive him, but for the first time, she heard sincerity rather than manipulation. And that, strangely, was enough closure for now. He left quietly, leaving no storm behind. That night, Laura sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the snow fall through the window. A soft knock came at the door. When she opened it, Coach Harris stood there, holding a small box. "Just a Christmas gift for Jake," he said, smiling shyly. "Didn't want to bother you, but I was driving by." She invited him in. Jake lit up when he saw him, and tore open the box. Inside was a brand new baseball glove, the kind he'd dreamed of but never asked for. Jake hugged him impulsively. "Thank you, Coach," he whispered. When Jake went upstairs to try it on, the house fell quiet again. Coach Harris turned to Laura, his voice low. "You've done something incredible, you know. You rebuilt everything he tried to break. If you do there..." Laura looked down, her cheeks warming. "I had help." He smiled gently. "If you ever want to talk or go out for coffee sometime, I'd like that. But only if you're ready." Laura felt something bloom in her chest, not excitement, not fear, but a gentle possibility. Something fragile, but real. "I'd like that too," she said. Later that evening, Jake called her into his room. On his phone screen was a new photo, him and Laura at the baseball field, snowflakes in their hair. He'd posted it with a simple caption, "We're okay." Laura hugged him, tears slipping down her cheeks, not from pain, but from pure, overwhelming gratitude. As she turned off the lights and made her way to bed, she realized the truth she thought she'd never feel again. Her life was hers now. Her peace was hers. Her future was bright, and she had earned every bit of it. And just like that, our story comes to a close. But if you are still here, right now, listening to these last words, then something in this journey touched your heart in a quiet, personal way. And I want to take a moment to sit with that, just you and me. Life doesn't always fall apart loudly. Sometimes it breaks in small, hidden places. But as Marcus Aurelius once said, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Laura and Jake's story reminds us that pain can push us towards strength, and heartbreak can lead us back to ourselves. Healing isn't a miracle. It's a choice we make every day. One honest conversation, one boundary, one brave step at a time. Maybe you've been where Laura stood. Maybe you felt what Jake felt. Or maybe you're still carrying something heavy right now. If so, let this be your reminder. You deserve peace, you deserve safety, and you deserve a future built on kindness, not fear. If this story spoke to you in any way, my friend, please take a second to like this video, share it with someone who may need it, and subscribe to our channel so you never walk these stories alone. We're here. And you're not alone.